Welcome to the Leadership Purpose with Robin podcast. I'm your host, Robin L. Owens, PhD, and this is where we dive in each week to give advice, tools, and tips for high-achieving women leaders, and we talk about leadership purpose and its importance for you. I am a college professor, and when I am not doing that, I am speaking, writing, coaching, mentoring, and teaching high-achieving women leaders how to find, and not only find, but how to stay in alignment with their leadership purpose so they can make a meaningful difference right there in their career, leadership, or business. Okay, let's dive in. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Leadership Purpose with Dr. Robin podcast. We're so glad you're here and that you take time out of your busy day, schedule, and life to listen into the podcast. I'm so excited that you are here joining us today. And today I am talking with Dr. Cassandra LeClair. Now, let me tell you a little bit about Dr. LeClair. She is a communication consultant, author, and motivational speaker. She's an expert on communicating in relationships and improving connections. And I just have to pause and say, no, we all need that.
Myself included.
Cassandra helps high-achieving women lead through intentional communication so they can take aligned action and embody their personal power. Dr. LeClair's mission is to educate individuals on how to understand their communication patterns and to have effective and healthy communication to enhance both their professional and personal relationships. And she is the author of the book, Being Whole, Healing Trauma and Reclaiming My Voice. Welcome, Dr. Cassandra LeClair.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
I'm so glad to have you. And I'm all eager to get into the conversation. We were talking before we jumped on the episode, but let's just get right into it. Now, you heard me read your kind of traditional, your bio introduction, but let everyone hear in your own words more about who you are and the work you do.
So the work that I do is deeply intertwined with who I am. I went through a series of events in my childhood that kind of propelled me in a different direction in terms of, I wanted to achieve things, I wanted to grow, I wanted to become somebody, but really not understanding why. So when I got to college, I was in this space of like, I don't really know who I am. I don't understand what's happening for me. And I really poured myself into my studies of learning more about self-awareness, how to communicate about things. And I learned that even though I wasn't necessarily so good at doing it for myself, I was really good at doing it for other people. So who I am is I'm a person who helps other people with those things. But then as a person for myself, I had to learn over the last couple of decades what that really was going to look like for me and work to understand how do I show up? How do I communicate with others? What are some of my past triggers or past traumas that I haven't fully healed from? And how can I really show up as myself? So you read the bio, and that for me is what I want for other people. I want you to be able to walk into any room and know that authentically you are being you and you are able to show up as that person, because then everything else just feels so good.
Right. I mean, that right there is the golden ticket to be able to walk in any room or at any time in life, just be who you are, right? Sure. Such a challenge to do that. That's wonderful. So now you kind of gave us an overview. Tell us sort of in more detail what your work looks like. How does that show itself? You help them do those things, but what does it look like?
A lot of it is I recently transitioned. I just finished up my job as a university professor where I was teaching communication classes, relational communication, family communication, gender communication, all of the ways that, we have these relationships. And so often we want to make it about the things other people are doing, but we can't change others. So we instead need to look at ourselves, how we're showing up, what patterns we're bringing into relationships and things like that. So in my work outside of the university over the last few years, what happened, as I mentioned, I needed to go back and heal from some trauma. And that's really what my book is about. I had to dig into some different areas. I was sexually abused as a child. And those patterns that I hung on to that were coping mechanisms to kind of get through that trauma just became part of who I was then. And so for me, writing my book and really learning how to separate out who am I outside of all of those coping mechanisms, who am I outside of those traumas? And I gave a TEDx talk then about that. And I started understanding like I have this space at the university, but there are so many other people that I think I can reach and talk to about this. And for the last few years, I've done workshops for businesses on things like mindset or burnout or boundaries, conflict. Those are kind of my big topic areas. But what this transition for me is I realized that I want to work with people who feel like I did, who feel like I've got all this stuff going on, or I look awesome on all these levels, but then why do I feel all this inside? And it's not necessarily imposter syndrome. It's sometimes it's like this recognition of I have everything I said I wanted. I have everything that I worked for. But so why do I still want more? Why do I want something different? And that so often comes back to some self-awareness, some understanding why you're unhappy with your own choices or with the people that you've chosen to be in your life. So really what I do then is I work with individual clients and I have group coaching where we just talk through some of these things. And I provide the container and the space for people to look at, okay, yeah, where do you need boundaries and why don't you have them? Okay, what patterns are you in conflict? And is that with just one person or is that with a bunch of people? And really helping people without shame or judgment, because we all have enough of that.
Right.
Like, who are you if you can let go of all of that other stuff? And I love to work with women in particular because I think that we are so conditioned to people please others and to feel like we have to nurture others before we nurture ourselves. And I really want to just empower other women to recognize, like, you can't pour from an empty cup. There are so many different sayings, right? And really, truly, you have to embody that and you have to walk that walk. You can't just say it and think it.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. It's such important work. It's such important work that you're doing because at many levels, regardless of the experience levels of trauma, there's always some level of hurt and pain that people that are affecting adults in their life today. And so thank you for sharing vulnerably about your own experience. Now let's just kind of change the energy just a little bit, and then we'll go back to being whole and talk more about that. Out of all you do, and I know you're working at the university and made your change. So congratulations on your shift and your growth. That's what I'll call it. Congratulations.
Thank you.
So in any area of work in the university, outside of the university, tell us what you enjoy most about your work. What really lights you up?
The conversations I get to have with people, to see them make those connections. Nothing I say is something you can't probably find on the internet. It's not like I'm some guru with these revolutionary words. I'm giving people the permission and helping them connect the dots and giving them tools to understand what they are feeling and how this works in their life. So when I can see that that's happening and really you can see it on people's face, you can feel their energy. That's the favorite part of my job, and I get that when I teach or do workshops. Like it doesn't feel like work. And I know you understand that in so many ways too. It gives me this energy and people are like, you work so much. I'm like, do I? Because it doesn't feel like that. It feels like great fun.
Yes. When you're working in your passion and you're fulfilled, it doesn't feel like work. Yes, for sure. For sure. I definitely understand that. And you've probably heard me say this before. This podcast is for high achieving women, right? High achieving women. And I describe high achieving women who are ambitious, professional, goal oriented, doing all the things. They support people in their personal and professional lives, but they rarely get support for themselves because people think they don't need it because they're doing all the things. I see you nodding in agreement. You understand that. So I thought, well, if I can have other high achieving women just share from their life experience and work experience, and then we all could kind of support each other through the podcast that way.
Yeah, it's such an important space because so often then too, when other people see you in that way, it feels even more vulnerable to admit that that's not accurate. So then we don't ask for the help that we maybe need. And then that creates more of that space, right? So It's so complex. It sounds on the surface like, oh, that's what it is, but it's so deep. There's many layers to it.
Yes, that is. You answered the question that I was going to ask you, what you think one of the challenges is. And that's one, right? You can't really share. You don't feel comfortable sharing.
Yeah. Or sometimes then too, because people have a perception, and this is something that I really went through myself too, is people had such a perception that I was like at this level, or I had all these things going on and on the surface, everything was great. And I felt happy most of the time. Right. But then even when I would try to open up to some people would be like, oh, well, no, you have all these other things, like almost just dismissive. So then it's like, okay, well, and I'm not going to tell anyone then. I'll just go over here and try to manage things myself. And what would happen for me then too sometimes is then I started to feel like I just had to manage everything. And a lot of times, especially as high achieving women, like I like to get stuff done. I'm an action taker. So I'm going to just take action and I'm going to do it. And one day I really had to look around and say, okay, how would I feel if I did ask for help on some of these areas? And I actually had it, if I actually had somebody who was supporting me or could help me in some of these things. And learning to ask for help and not feel weak about it, or not feel then like I was like not living up to some persona or not matching up with who I was. Like that is definitely something that I had to work through. And to be fully transparent, the thing that kind of pushed me to have to do it is I got very, very sick. I have lupus. And I couldn't do a lot. And so it was this space where I had to ask people for help. But then interestingly, after I got better and was able to go back to work, then that other part of me took over again, so it was like, oh no, I don't have to ask for help. Like it was different when I was sick. So really, again, then working through that and understanding, oh no, it's just okay to ask people for things sometimes, or to tell people where you are feeling like you're not on top of your game or whatever it is. And again, it was a process for me personally. And that's also why I'm so passionate about helping other people with that, just like you are.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. And it's interesting how the body will respond and let us know what's going on in our lives to get our attention often. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I understand that. I'd have to stay focused because I have like 10 other thoughts in my mind. Mm-hmm. Okay, let's stay focused and stay on task here. All right. And so you kind of gave us some inkling about how to get through it by sharing your own experience. But let's just say there's a high achieving woman listening now. What's some word of advice you can give to her other than what you said already? Just from your experience or your expertise, either way.
One of the biggest things that I've seen when I've been working with people is having some boundaries. And I know that boundaries is kind of a buzzy word. And a lot of times we think about putting boundaries on other people, or that it's saying no to things. But with most high achieving women, it's more about what kind of boundaries do you need on your own energy? How are you managing what you're taking on? And what areas are you taking things on because maybe you feel like you are the only one who's going to be capable to do it, or that no, it's going to fall apart if you don't do it. And then looking at why that is. Okay, is that real? Is that accurate? Is everything really going to fall apart if you don't do it? Or is that part of your drive and personality to feel that you have to be the one to do it, or to feel needed, or to feel like it's your job? And not to say like don't all want to feel needed and important. That's wonderful. And we want that. But also recognizing if that's what's driving you. And so really what I do is when helping people set boundaries is that comes from your needs, understanding your needs and your values and learning about how to protect your energy so that you aren't getting burnt out and resentful at other people, right? So some of that space is hard because, again, you're a high achieving person because you've worked hard and you're not afraid to dig in. And so sometimes, again, it kind of goes hand in hand with asking for help, right? Or delegating, and knowing that by letting some of those other pieces go, you are able then to step into that personal power that only you can embody, So other people can probably do some of those other tasks, but only you can do this thing, and helping people kind of see that.
Yes. It makes me think about, I said I was going to stay on task, but I'm going to digress. I couldn't help myself. All right. So I've talked about this in previous episodes about this idea of doing those things that come naturally to you, using your natural abilities and kind of staying in your lane and not doing all the things and using the gifts that come naturally to you. And so that I thought about that while you were talking about that. All right. So now tell us about your book. The book is Being Whole. Mm-hmm. Being Whole. Tell us a little bit more about the book to start with, and then I'll follow up with another question.
So being whole for me is I did feel like I had all of these, I had my life together, but yet there was still something within me that I just had some anxiety, or I had something that was just feeling not completely happy. And I would try to go to counseling for different things. I've been in therapy over the years. And finally, what happened for me where the book came about is my family was hit by a drunk driver. And in that moment, we were not physically injured, minor injuries, concussion, things like that. But what happened to me in that moment, even though I've been through a lot of other worse things, is it's like you said, my body caught up. My mind caught up. I could no longer hang on to making everything okay. That was my breaking point. And so this was not a book I planned to write. I never thought I would talk about any of the things that are in this book. But after that crash, I really I quit social media. I was just kind of beside myself. I went to work, I raised my kids. But then what I did is I dug in. I had the university resources. So I was at the library checking out books. I'm writing journals. And what happened is over a period of about a year, when I really started to understand what I was pushing aside. I was pushing aside my abuse, because what I did then is I took the words of my abuser and I made it my life's mission to prove him wrong. So, he would say the typical abuse things like, no one will ever love you, or you'll never be good enough. And instead of taking that to heart, I was like, watch me go. And that was something then where when this all kind of unraveled and I'm journaling and I'm understanding kind of where my own patterns come from. So I took my journals, and being the research geek that I am, I coded them. I was reading through them, and I didn't even do that on purpose. I'm reading through them and I was like, oh, that's a theme. Oh, there's a pattern. And so the chapters in my book are the themes that came out from my own healing journey. Oh. And it was things like recognizing, oh, okay, you seek external validation because you have no internal self-worth. Mm. Oh, you're people pleasing over here because somewhere deep inside you are afraid that people aren't going to like you, even though you're proving so hard. And so really understanding some of these patterns that were keeping me in this state of why don't I feel like myself? Or why am I, kind of discombobulated inside? And so after I figured that all out for myself and had these pages all coded, I was like, oh, I cannot be the only person who feels this way. Because this is not actually even about my abuse. This is about the things that I did in the aftermath to make myself okay. Mm-hmm. And that's the thing about coping mechanisms. We need them at the time, but then so often, especially if it's for an extended duration of time that we're using them, we fail to separate where we are versus where that coping mechanism is. So I had all these achievements, would go through my whole life, but they felt empty, or I wouldn't stop to celebrate them. Or people would say thank you, and I'd be like, or congratulations. And I'd be like, oh, thank you. But then never let it sink in, never absorb that. So the book then for me was the catalyst, okay, I need to do this for real. I need to share this with other people. And that's where too, the TEDx talk came out of the book. And that's really where my business, where I, again, decided that this is something I need to share with other people and help them see where their patterns are. Because that's all that was, is all of the different patterns that I was doing that were taking me away from who I really am inside.
Yes. It sounds like the book was birthed out of a long journey and a culmination of a life. And I'm interested in the title, Being Whole. What does that mean for you, being whole?
Well, so I guess it kind of started there and then I got distracted, is that I remember then when I finally realized what was going on, I remember saying, I'm tired of being halfway healed. I want to be whole. Oh. And it was like I was always trying to heal things, but I wasn't going into the right thing. I was managing what was happening at the time. Or, when I had lupus, it's like, then it's about lupus. When I got divorced, it was like, oh, now it's about my divorce, without realizing, oh, no, it's deeper. There are so many other things here. So once I did that, and on the cover, I don't know if you can see it, but on the cover of the book, if you look it up, it's kintsugi pottery. So that resonates with me. It's something I didn't even know about before I wrote my book. But when I told people about my book, 3 different people were like, oh, like the pottery. And because I was saying how I felt like there were all these pieces inside of me and I just wanted to put them back together, because otherwise they just kept poking me and showing up in ways that I didn't even understand. So the pottery then is pottery that's been broken and put back together with gold, because we can be stronger than we were before. Yeah. And that's what that is to me.
I love that. And I so appreciate you for doing all you had to do to take what was inside of you and put it in the book and share it with all of us. And I'll be sure to highlight your book on my website so people can get it. And I'm thinking right now there's probably people listening saying, I want to hear more and I want to be in touch with Dr. LeClair. How can I be in touch with her? So where would people get in touch with you?
I'd actually love for people you can find me on Instagram at Dr. Cassandra LeClair. And also I just put up a free resource on my website. So if you go to CassandraLeClair.com/guide, I put up a guide that's 30 ways to say no without guilt, because I think we all need a little help there. And that was, again, something that I struggled with. And my website is CassandraLeClair.com.
Okay. We'll put those in the show notes for sure. And oh my gosh, did you say 30 ways to say no?
Yeah, I was only going to do 10. And then once I started going, and I kind of had to cut it off because I was like on a roll. I'm like, oh, then you could say this, then you could do that. And that even felt empowering because, again, that was born out of something that I struggled with. Everything that I work with people on and then I teach people on, in addition to my background and my training and my education, there are things that resonate with me. So then I can share my personal stories and weave them in with the teachings that I know about to say, hey, yeah, I'm not just telling you to do these things. This is why, and here's how it changed my life.
Yes. I can only imagine that people, what a handy guide to have. Do you remember what one of them out of the 30, what's one before we go? What's one way to say no?
That sounds like a wonderful opportunity. It's just not right for me at this time.
Oh.
One of my favorites. Or thank you for thinking of me, but right now that doesn't align with my schedule or whatever, just even. And sometimes it's like, I don't want to couch it, or I'm not trying to be like beat around the bush. And I know we all have heard no as a complete sentence, but that doesn't always feel good to me. So I had to honor the fact that it doesn't always feel good to me to just say no. So what are some other phrases that I can go to that make me feel okay? And sometimes I do need to offer more of an explanation, but other times I don't. So
yes. And I love that you have so many options, because with 30, for different cases and different environments and different people, you might want to help very differently. So I can't wait to I'll get that myself. All right. So I'm so happy that we had this time together. It's everything that I thought it was going to be. Thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule in the midst of your transition in this next chapter of your life to share your experience and expertise with us. Appreciate you.
Oh, I'm so grateful. This is the favorite. You asked me too, what's my favorite part? Like I say, the conversations, the fact that we get to share this and get to experience this space with each other and then share that with other people who are listening. That's wonderful. So thank you so much for having me.
You're welcome. Okay, everyone. And if you want to hear more from me, you can reach me on my website, robinlowens.com, or you can reach me on social media, Robin L. Owens, PhD. Robin L. Owens, PhD. Just pick your favorite social media site and you can find me there. And until next time, this is Dr. Robin. Thank you for tuning into this episode of the Leadership Purpose with Robin podcast. If you enjoyed it, head on over and rate and subscribe so you never miss an episode. New episodes drop every week and I can't wait to hang out with you again soon. Meanwhile, this is Robin signing off. See you next time.